first year, I barely wrote my own writing. I was doing just quotes because I didn't know how to write. And then one day I just started writing about obsession and people love it. And now I basically found my idea forever.
What are the things to look out for to make sure that your obsession is a healthy one?
You want to obsess over something that has to do with creation, like an output versus an input.
Yeah.
Right? It's like obsessed with drugs or alcohol. That's purely selfish. It's just for you. Versus creation, it's art, or it's YouTube, or it's fitness, it's running. It's something outside of yourself.
Yep.
That's usually a healthy obsession. You have to find where you find joy, and some people will find joy working, nonstop on their thing. The right relationships will support your obsession and will not tell you to be unobsessed. And if you are going too far, they'll tell you. It's not something you should be 24/7. You have to go through periods of obsession, whether that's a few months or whether that's a few hours a day, then you come out.
What are the things that they can do from tomorrow onwards to help them find their obsession?
If you do something every day for a year, you'll completely change your life.
Zach, what are you currently obsessed with?
Running. Easy, instant answer.
Why has it become an obsession for you?
I started running more this year. Kind of like, I feel like a lot of runners, that get really into it. It doesn't really happen consciously, right? You go for one run. Like early this year, I was super slow and pretty heavy. I was probably like touching 230 pounds and 9-minute pace, 8-minute pace. But then you get more and more into it. And then this fall, my friend Danny Miranda tells me he's doing a marathon in December. Didn't sign up for it yet, but I'm like, I started going longer distance, started doing 10 miles, started doing 13 miles. And then the moment I signed up for the marathon, which was only about a month out, October 27th, and the race was December 2nd, when I signed up for it, boom, it was like instantly completely obsessed, watching running videos nonstop, learning everything because, it's so much to learn, all the nutrition, all the, and that's kind of how it happened. And now that I just did the race last week, now I feel like it's an entire new world that I can't escape from, which is like a sick feeling.
I think the real turning point there is the skin in the game moment where you've signed up. That changes everything because you can talk about it and say, I might do an Ironman next year. I might do this. I might do that. But until you've actually made the date, you can put it in your calendar and you think, oh shit, 107 days to go. That just makes the obsession begin, or you realize you made a mistake. But I've never met anyone that's thought, you know what, this was a mistake, unless it's just something that they can't manage within the circumstances. But the beauty is manipulating the circumstances to make it work, because you've gone through an evolution in your presence online, haven't you? Whereby your background is effectively as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what you write about, the mechanism for it in the real world has become running. Am I right in saying?
100%. 100%.
What are the biggest lessons you've learned in the short term that you think are most general from committing to something that scares you and seeing it through?
Yeah, I think commitment breeds obsession, right? Like when I started the content, which was almost 5 years ago now on Instagram, that's kind of how it happened. I just one day sat down and realized I was going to do this every day. I was going to post something every day. And there was no time limit. That was the commitment though. And when that happened, it just took over my world, kind of like what's happening now with the running. And, I was studying, how to make the post and what post to make and how to grow, how to like engage with other people, the whole thing. And so that's like a big piece of it. It's just like commitment breeds obsession. And so I think often you could have this thing that you absolutely love, but you just haven't given yourself the forcing function for it. And there's a thin line there where it's like, you can't force obsession. Obsession should be natural. You should force yourself to stop your obsession, right? But I do think sometimes you need this like trigger to allow yourself to be completely engrossed in this world. And so that's like the big piece, I think, commitment. Commit to something and see what happens. Whether that's a race or whether that's, a cadence with, your art, your craft. The other piece has just been, this is like when I'm writing those posts, right? The ones that do really well, it's literally like me and to be fair, I've only really started running this year. So I'm like excited for how these posts turn out. But like, it's like me mile 10 into a workout, pushing like 180 heart rate, 190. I don't really get up there, but like 180 heart rate. And it's like the thoughts I have then, just remembering like pieces of that and sharing them. And so it's like pushing yourself into that state, I think is something most people don't do. And it lets you hear and become a different version of yourself in a very true way. And I was missing that so much in my life. I can remember like 2 months ago, one of the first like really hard workouts I did running on the West Side Highway, where you'll be tomorrow.
I'll be there tomorrow. Yeah.
It's
I've
great.
heard a lot of good things, and I've heard the East is going to be very disappointing and the West is going to be brilliant.
I barely ran on the East.
Okay.
So to be fair, I can't the bottom's nice of the East. But anyway, I remember one of my first workouts there, just going completely madman mode. It's like what I call it, and just screaming at myself out loud to go faster. And I went faster than I ever went. And like I left that workout a new person. So yeah, those are the two takeaways, like commitment and just like pushing yourself into that state allows you to feel and see different things.
And those things aren't exclusive to running. I think that's the key thing as well, because you're making a commitment to allowing yourself to be backed into a corner, and you sort of need to put your fist up and figure out how to get through it, whether that's in a workout, whether that's in a business setting, whether it's in a financial setting, because if you just put all of your money into one thing, you're like, fuck, I hope this works. It's feeling that pressure and coming through the other side, having learned some lessons along the way. And that's why I think you're in a very privileged position to be able to articulate your thoughts from a running point of view with the background that you've got in writing and the content side of things and delivering things simply for people, to be able to now articulate why running is such a valuable mechanism for people to capitalize on the low-hanging fruits that come from just committing to something that's scary. So you started talking about the concept of the dark place, which is what I'm assuming Madman Mode led to. Right. You just talk us through your experience with that so far, because I think it's a concept I'm very, very familiar with over the years, but I don't necessarily have the ability to articulate it in text in the way that you would, because that's not my craft, which will be a discussion we'll come on to later. But the dark place, what is it to you?
I'm sure you could articulate it because you go there in ways many people don't. But yeah, I think out of all, like I'm very obsessed with terms, right? Like my mission in life is basically just to own the word obsession and help spread that to the world, kind of like you have discipline, passion, right? But anyway, I think the dark place might be the most important term I ever like make, because it is literally, I've been saying that word for years, like that phrase, which isn't really mine. People often say a dark place. I kind of coined it as the, and it applies to a lot of things. It obviously, it's that moment in the workout where you are dying, you are surrounded by demons, you are, pushing yourself somewhere you've never been, right? Like you could paint the imagery a million ways. There's that part of it. It could be, the year of your life after a breakup where you're lost and you're overweight and you don't know what to do with your life. That's definitely a dark place. It could be, I've had a few in my life. One was after I stopped playing college soccer, I was in a dark place for a little bit. I didn't know what to do with my life. I just, I spent decades or almost 2 decades playing soccer. And now I had this whole, I had to create a new identity for myself. So the dark place when you're in it. And the reason it's the most important is because you kind of have to go through that to, I think, reach extreme greatness. I think you look at the people at the pinnacle of their craft, and it's very rare to find someone who didn't go through one or multiple dark places, right? And yeah, so that's what it is. I think it's like I look back on the run and the marathon I just did, and like it was the best dark place in my life. Like all I want to do is go back. Like I heard you get depressed after races sometimes. Is that true?
Yeah. I wouldn't. I call it the post-event blues, or like a come down, because I think it's very, having been sort of clinically depressed myself in my own dark place years ago. Yeah. I sort of know what one is a response and one is a state of being, where I view a state of depression as a state of being, whereas the post-event blues being a sort of response to the hard work and spike of effort. Because
natural.
Commitment is build, huge peak, and then the worldview existence, the day-to-day that you've been operating on for that period of commitment, it served its purpose, it's done. But you've got used to operating like that, which means that all of a sudden you just completely change your environment, and we all know how much environment can manipulate how we feel. So I've suffered big bouts of post-event blues that, as much as I feel I'm well equipped to deal with them, the bottom line is I just need to sort of wait it out. There'll be good days, there'll be bad days, and I often try and get my teeth stuck into something from a business point of view, try and jump into a new training goal, but actually it's a good time to sort of just rest and quite literally recover psychologically and physically. The biggest one, the double Ironman, the double brutal I did last year in September 2022, was, it took me until about January, February to really like feel like myself again. And I did the reason that I did the Goggins 4x4 I did it by 96.
Yeah.
So 4 miles every 4 hours for 4 days, just because I thought, you know what, there's lots of 4s there. That feels neat. And part and parcel of doing that was because I kind of needed to prove to myself that I could still do hard stuff because I hadn't been doing anything that was anywhere near the level of the double for 3 or 4 months. So I didn't feel like myself. And I kind of did it. I was like, that honestly wasn't that bad. And that kind of gave me the confidence to be like, okay, you've still got this ability. You've just been in a period of dealing with the come down effect of that big spike of commitment. And then from there, I've sort of been able to manage it better this year. But I know what I'm training for now, March, 250K in one go. There's going to be a couple of months where I'm going to really struggle with the recovery of it because you get so obsessed with what you're doing, but you put yourself in a position where you actually can't execute it to the level that you want to because you're quite literally reaping the fruits of your labor, which is a good thing. So it's about how you frame that time period and that opportunity. Do you allocate a little bit more time to certain things from a business point of view, from a craft point of view, and just look at things objectively? Because you can't, I personally don't think that you can just will your way out of it.
Do you always have something next though? Like, is it rare? Basically?
Generally speaking, but I think realistically, last year was sort of a real spike for me where was unhealthy. My prep was unhealthy alongside managing the businesses, personal life and everything. It was at points unhealthy, and getting to the start line was as much a victory as getting to the finish line was. Yeah. So I had things that I were next, that were planned next, but they weren't obsessive for me. They were in the notes. I thought I'll go for that, but I didn't have the same get up and this is my mission in life, which meant that I didn't care about it as much as I did, which meant that it was harder to work against the post-event blues. So question back to you is, how are you coping with the post-marathon first? Because it's not been that quick. It's not been that long a process from sort of starting this journey to completing the marathon. And here you are out the back end, hungry and dehydrated, as we discussed before we got started.
And like starving. Well, I was like hungry this morning. It hasn't, that's why I'm like hesitant to like, I sound too like cocky or like confident because like I haven't been doing this that long. And I mean, I signed up for my next one, like basically right after. Yeah. So that will be February 18th in Austin.
Yeah.
I guess
which is quite soon. In the things, yeah.
I just feel like the progress I made since I took it seriously was so insane that 2 months from now I could make hopefully just as insane progress or just, great progress.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I wish it was sooner, but it'll be a good amount of time to like I really want to get a proper coach, get a proper plan, and, push as hard as I can. So I guess it's interesting, right? Like I think Huberman says how it's like the dopamine you get on the way up, you're going to get the same coming down.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's like the neurological reason, because like that dopamine high I had during the end of that run was like nothing I ever felt.
Yeah.
Same for you and your stuff, I'm sure. And so, yeah, I don't know. I definitely need to take a few weeks and, figure out, because when I talk about obsession, like literally the last month and a half, all I did was think about running, and that has a downside where like I have to figure out, some business stuff, some content stuff, like that needs some attention. How I'm coping though, I don't know. I'm just so happy. I feel like I have this new thing now, which I didn't have before. Like I worked out the last few years, I lifted, but like I wouldn't really call myself an athlete, wasn't training for anything, wasn't in great shape.
Yeah.
So it's like, have this new thing that every day I'm excited to wake up and learn more about, and there's so much to learn.
I think that's the value of performance metrics as well, over just sort of traditional bodybuilding, fitness, aesthetic based metrics, is that it's so measurable and you can actually really track where input equals output. And I think that makes it so rewarding for an obsession journey, because you have a ever increasing stack of proof that the difficulty that you willingly, it's worth saying, go through each and every day to get to the end goal equals what you wanted it to, which is very reassuring when you wake up one morning and you think, it's pretty horrible weather outside, I don't really want to be doing this. And then you do it.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, in fact, 99 times out of 100, you'll get back in through the door and be like, I'm very glad that I did that.
Correct.
The 1 in the 100 might be, I don't know, you might have slipped on some ice or something.
Happens.
But that
in New York, you got to watch out tomorrow. My buddy Hunter, before the New York City Marathon, stepped on a glass bottle.
Okay.
He was fine.
Okay.
But just keep that in mind.
I'll keep that in mind.
Especially the east side. Like,
I was
like a watch crew, like looking in front of you.
Yeah, but just binoculars. Yeah, scouting things out.
That can happen.
Yeah.
Happened to me yesterday.
Okay, we'll have a look.
It'll be good.
Yeah, it'll be good. Well, you know what? I want to experience New York in a weird and wonderful way. So if I step on glass bottles or...
The piers are good. You'll be good around. It'll be good.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to the West Coast Highway because I've heard, again, like it'll be a collection of people on a Saturday that are out.
Actually, no, it's winter. It won't be that bad.
They'll be out following what they're training for, their obsession. It's just good to be in amongst those people, especially in a setting where it's flat ground. I guarantee I'll be seeing people bursting themselves on intervals or some sort of tempo stuff.
It's flat.
Yeah, it'll be good fun. It'll be good fun. But a lot of what you just mentioned there ties neatly into the concept of the artist, athlete, entrepreneur narrative that you're really, you're pulling the thread on at the moment online, aren't you? And I think when I saw that, that was something I really connected with because I would in no way call myself an artist. But from a creative point of view, I have the three pillars of my life are creative output in terms of content, the business side of things, which is all consuming day to day, and then the athlete side of things, which is probably the most obvious one. And those three pillars could not move forward with the obsession that I have for all three of them if all three pillars weren't present simultaneously.
Correct.
I would not enjoy my day-to-day life if I was just an athlete. I would be bored and unstimulated with some things. If I was just put in front of a camera day to day and didn't have any sort of creative output on what the process was, then I would lose the obsession with that side of things. If I didn't have the businesses, then a lot of the bigger picture impact side of things that I want to achieve with them in the long term, I couldn't feed into from the creative side of things, from the athlete side of things, because they're all in the same ecosystem. And those three components for me are sort of what really underpin my mission and obsession day to day in life. So as you've started exploring that as a narrative, what have been your key findings and why do you think it's got legs?
Yeah, I think it's great. Like a lot of people really resonate with that even more than obsession, which is interesting because obsession kind of turns some people off.
Yeah.
Right. As like negative, and they takes a while to see the positive. But artist, athlete, entrepreneur, it's like, oh, that's me, or that's what I want to be.
Yeah.
And I look at the people I really admire, the people at the pinnacle. A lot of them fit this category. Like Rogan's a perfect example, right? His art, his real first art was comedy. His athletics, he was a beast with jiu-jitsu or MMA, whatever. And his business, I don't really know, obviously he's crushed. He has all these companies now, on it, whatever. And he has a podcast. And the way I look at it, it's like, then you have, Tim Ferriss, right? He did all these like different jiu-jitsu competitions. He did his podcast. He had his nootropic business and then startup investing. Hormozi, right? Alex Hormozi, acquisition.com, beast bodybuilder.
Yep.
And his art is, YouTube content, right?
Yep.
And you just make a list of the people you really admire, right? And if you're listening to this podcast, and they probably hit all these. And what really happens when this really works is you have these three pillars, right? And you take them and you put them into this one thing that can compound like crazy. That's kind of how I look at it. I'm kind of like figuring out this idea. It's like the obsession filter, right? You take the art, you take the athletics, and you take the business, and you combine it into this one output. So like Rogan, the perfect example is his podcast, right? He's the ultimate example. Because he did this for decades, right? His art was like comedy combined into podcasting. I think you're kind of doing that with YouTube, I'd say, right? That's your biggest thing, right?
Yeah. That's the focus.
Yeah. And it's like, that's when it becomes insane, when you just build this compounding thing around all these, and they all support each other, like you said. And they don't happen without one another. And yeah, I think it's really, really important. I think like when I look at my life, when there were things missing, it was because one of these pillars wasn't, fulfilled. Yeah. And it's so simple, which is why I like it. It's like, oh, I'm missing this, or I'm lacking in this. I think that's why people resonate with it.
You can therefore spot the gaps in your own existence versus the person you want to be. And a real key thing for me throughout managing those pillars for the past several years, now that I'm much better equipped to manage my own sort of mental well-being versus a younger version of myself, is not necessarily idolizing anyone else externally, but using the person that you want to be in the future as your hero. Correct. Using the person you want to be in the future as the person that you idolize and you look up to and you take a lot from, because it can be achieved. And even a year ago, I'd say 2 years normally, but even a year ago, the existence I have now, if you'd said to Fergus a year ago, this is the existence that you will have, I go, a good one, not a chance. But it's time and time again.
It's compounding.
Yeah, that's it.
Fast.
Yeah.
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
It's like, and because how long have you been doing YouTube?
3 and a bit years.
Exactly.
And the first, almost 4 actually, and the first 2 years were complete diminishing returns.
And now you're going to feel this way like every year, even more so.
Yeah.
As long as you keep going, which you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the empowering thing for anyone listening or anyone that feels like they might not be where they want to be, is that just by committing to something intimidating, which can be as simple as a 5K, it can be as simple as just putting on that thing you've been putting off in the back of your mind, saying yes to that might be the thing that unlocks all of this opportunity that the future version of yourself that you should look up to and view as a hero can become.
And it should be, I think, like, I like this phrase, like, just barely possible. It should be like pretty, like, when I signed up for this marathon in Memphis, like, I didn't really have any goals. Like, in the beginning, I thought I'd be like under 4 hours maybe. And so like when I started to get really ambitious, I was like, all right, this should just barely be possible. It's like, those are the perfect goals, I think.
Yeah. It's not stupid, but
correct.
Well, no, it should be stupid. I think it should be a little stupid. Yeah. But it's realistic, but within parameters that are very, very intimidating.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I get so much value from triathlons and ultras and things, because the variables at play are completely not up to you. And that's why even more specifically with extreme triathlons versus regular Ironmans and things like that, when you chuck that distance into cold water, jellyfish, 8 degrees Celsius, 40, 50 mile an hour winds, elevation, all these things that can go wrong that you cannot do anything about when you're out there, that's where it forces you to sort of adapt to the things that you couldn't have prepared for. And that's where the realistic goal setting, you're putting yourself in an arena where you're kind of opening yourself up to getting punched in the face a few times. But it's the punches in the face that actually make the value at the back end.
Correct.
And I think the ultra, you will get into ultras. I think this conversation.
Yeah, how does that work? Like, because I've been thinking about it. It's like, not that I've been wanting to do one. It's just like everyone gets to do them after they start with marathons or shorter distance. How does that happen?
So I think it's the question is, what is further like? And that's kind of open-ended, because I mean, if we look at the backyard ultras now, like people aren't far off going for a week in these things at this point, which is running on the hour, every hour, continuously, and the world records are getting stupider and stupider and stupider. And at one point, those people will have been running, they'll have ran their first 50K, they'll have ran their first 100K. And now they're asking this question of what on earth is going on. And the only reason I'm now not completely intimidated and terrified by the thought of running 250K without any sleep stops or anything planned is because I've experienced that sleep deprivation exposure before. But the way I felt about that stuff before I'd done it was, is this even possible? Is this something that I could tolerate? I don't have any concept of how this could be a thing. And I think that curiosity is what will ultimately get you into ultras at some point. And I think you'll probably skip 50K. I think you'll go straight to 100. That's my guess. But it's you take the performance metrics out of it and you open yourself up to, I'd say marathons are more about ruthless execution done well. Ultras are more about ruthless wrestling with your own mind done repeatedly.
That makes sense.
And I think the amount of times you force yourself to sort of ask, you meet yourself along the way and you kind of have to look yourself in the eye and ask, am I going to keep going? What are the challenges here? Is this niggle in your ankle that you're complaining about actually something to worry about, or you're looking for a way out? Those questions come and come and come and come. And then when you get to the finish line, you've gone through so many little iterations of a scrap with your own mind that you're a much better person for it.
And is that like, because I feel like people get into marathons or running because of the ladder for the mind games, but then as they progress, it becomes all about like the tactical, all the little nitty gritty details.
Yeah.
And that's why they get pulled back into like ultras to get that feeling back. Is that kind of it?
Yeah, I'd say so. And a huge thing for me, I mean, coming off the back of 500-pound deadlift and sub 5 minute mile this year, because it's such black and white, this is the time, this is the weight. Every decision, everything you do day to day could be a contributing factor to success or failure in that goal. And I think as artist, athlete, entrepreneur narrative being pulled on, there are certain elements of being pulled into things here, pulled into things there, where you might not get 8 hours sleep. You might be delayed at an airport. You might have all these things that can contribute. And I think the value of black and white metrics is huge, but I don't think it should be the only thing. I think the curiosity of how far can I go? What is this going to feel like is where ultras are really, really valuable, because it forces you to confront a version of yourself that you can't get to unless you're X amount of miles into an ultra. But I do think that balanced against black and white metrics where you know this is the pace I need to set, this is the work I need to do, that is very, very rewarding and self-affirming for you to be able to move things forwards. But for me, a balance of black and white versus more subjective, you just need to fight your way through this metrics is very valuable for me personally.
Like the art and science, right?
Yeah.
basically, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. One's objective, one's more subjective, and I think that is the beauty of it.
That's the only reason I think I might be able to be a good runner, is like the art side, like how I talk to myself on runs, the things I do, because from talking to other runners, they're not totally normal, and like I don't know. So that excites me, the things you're saying.
Yeah, there's a curiosity there, which I know will lead you to ultras. But that's my main, my main driver. Is curiosity. Like the example I use at the moment is high rocks. Everybody I know is trying to drag me into high rocks, saying, "Oh, you should do this.
You
should
do
that.
A beast. You could take it over."
I think I could do quite well.
Yeah,
I've got all of the components that would make me a good high rocks athlete, but it doesn't excite me. There's nothing really about it. That's it. So I'd only be doing that for ego. I'd only be doing that to prove a point. I'd only be doing that for black and white metrics, which, from a business point of view, is arguably a good idea.
Yeah.
But my rule is I train for what I'm curious and excited about, and therefore, if it's not exciting for me in the morning, I'm not gonna get the value that I get from training day to day unless I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
So I'm probably gonna miss the boat on a good business opportunity, a good internet clout opportunity, but the rule is if it's not curiosity driven and excitement driven, I won't do it. And I think that's something that will hold, if I hold myself accountable to that, that will give me the sustainability in this game that I otherwise wouldn't have. Because if you're just being pulled from one thing to the next, then you lose the obsession with the actual craft itself, which for me is self-discovery. That is the value of training for me, is self-discovery. And that's why, from a hybrid point of view, it's so extrapolated, because you've got one end of the spectrum versus the next, and there's a whole load of lessons along the way in that spectrum that you can turn up certain dials on, turn down certain dials on throughout the year, and learn different lessons that you can then take into relationships, business, craft, all these things that go with it. And I do fully view fitness as one of the best mechanisms for that self-discovery, which I can tell you're very much aligned with at the moment.
100%. I missed it, in my life, and got it back this year, which is amazing. Yeah. I love the words you use too, like self-discovery and like curiosity. Like that's what it is. Once you start asking yourself this question, you have to pay attention to the questions. You can't ignore it. Right. And you keep asking yourself, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? That's what you should do.
And that confidence spills over into other things as well. Like once you keep proving to yourself that you can and can and can and can, it means you'll probably be a little bit more risky in the things that that could have good outcomes. And I think that's where a lot of people, especially, the world's pretty chaotic at the moment. Everything's difficult to sort of see objectively. And it means that people taking risks that potentially lead to the life that they want to be living, it's harder to do that. And I think through this process of just commitment and it's pulling the thread on something you're passionate about, because that could become obsessive. Mm-hmm. And becoming obsessive, I know it is kind of a dirty word, isn't it? The old Z's thing is obsessed as a word the lazy used.
Was that his big word?
I think,
that word a lot?
It used to, he had there was that pose that he did. Yeah. And then there were loads of gyms that was obsessed as a word the lazy used to describe the dedicated. Yep. And when I was younger, I thought, that's so toxic. I love it. As I was in my absolute peak, let's get jacked and wear stringer vest era. Yep. But the let's get jacked and wear stringer vest era for me was the gateway drug to all of this, because it was, you're overweight, you can't play rugby anymore because I'd had too many concussions. Huge part of my life was taken away.
Concussions.
Yeah,
maybe
get you.
I were fucked up. Probably.
Maybe that could be it. There was research coming out on that, but we won't acknowledge that.
Sorry.
But it's, too many concussions. Fergus, you can't play rugby anymore. Oh, right. A huge part of my life is taken away. How do I fill this void? And then I just started training as if I was going back to a rugby pitch at some point. And along the way, I accidentally found out that I love this and it was making me better. I was getting leaner. I was more in control of my food, which meant I was more in control of my exam revision. Mm-hmm. I was more structured. My time management was better. I took things more seriously. I looked at things more objectively. I was more selective about when I did and didn't drink. And the downstream benefits of simply deciding I'm going to get jacked because of some mad Australian on the internet was kind of the thing. And that obsessed is the word the lazy used to describe the dedicated. It wasn't something that it wasn't something I bled, but I did feel genuinely obsessed with what I was doing. And I was completely confident that temptation, sort of ulterior motives, anything like that, I was just completely steadfast. Like I had my mission and nobody was going to get in the way of that. And I actually feel less in control of that now than I did when I was younger, because I've gone through so many iterations of I've got that proof, so it's almost less exciting to me now. And because I've got the other pillars of inputs, where I get a lot more value from now is when I'm really put up against it from a business setting, when I need to figure things out there, when there's difficult conversations to be had. A lot of that smile on my face at the back end that comes from having achieved what you said you were going to achieve or finding the solution that you said you were going to find is very much akin to the 18-year-old version of me that just got leaner and went to the gym 5 days a week. And that's why I think the self-discovery is so key, because again, to people that aren't into training, saying fitness can change your life sounds very trivial. And saying that being obsessed with going to the gym 5 days a week with your headphones in can be life-changing sounds silly to people that don't get it. But I think positive obsession can be life-changing. And the reason is people fear it is because they haven't yet found what they're obsessed with in the day-to-day. And that does come from passion. But it's doing the work to find the thread to pull on from a passion point of view. And that's the hard bit. That's the bit that isn't as easily presented in the modern world, I don't think.
Well, because there's no answer.
Yeah.
There's no answer. The only answer is to create and do a lot of stuff. That is the only answer that, like Paul Graham has this quote, I bring it up all the time. It's like, if you don't know what you're meant to do, you have to just always produce, whether that's in sport, whether that's in art. And if you always produce, you'll find your passion like, a rock going downstream. I love that analogy because it's the only way, because no one can tell you it. And the other problem, which I've been thinking about lately, is that if you are like an intense and curious person, which you seem like, I think I'm like that, you'll probably be good at a lot of things because just most people don't have those traits, right? So let's say you pick up, I don't know, fencing, probably be sick compared to the average if you get really into it. Let's say you're forced to do fencing, right? Probably be great. But you could have been so insane at this other thing that you really loved. And so I think that's another trap, is like not getting pulled into these things you could be really good at just because you're a really good person, have a really good, mentality, but finding the thing you alone are actually meant to do. And it takes many people many years or many decades. I still don't think I've found all of mine,
Always a student. Always the way that I like to look at things. Because I don't want to ever fall into the trap of thinking that even though I'm right now, the version of myself, I feel like I'm in control of it. I don't ever want to be arrogant or hubristic enough to feel like I've figured it out.
The other trap that I've fallen into is like you have these idols, right? People, I'm sure you have athletes you idolize, like Ziz back in the day, maybe, or maybe not even idolize, but just really look up to.
Respect,
and then you're gonna want to copy their obsession, and that's, I've done that all the time. Where like I think I'm meant to do this, but almost always I think that's not true. Almost always it's there's some through line or there's something they're doing that you need to apply to your thing, right? And so it's like that is a trap too that I've gone.
That's why comparison is just not the way to go. You should look at the traits that the people you look up to are consistently executing. Mm-hmm. And try and apply that to your own existence, rather than just thinking this is what they do, therefore that is what I should do. It's the behavior patterns and the mechanisms rather than the things themselves that are important. And I think that's where social media can dilute that reality for people, because there's so much just presentation of other people's lives that it's hard to actually read the writing on the wall for your own. And that's why I think curating what you consume on social media is important, first and foremost. But I think also why the only way you can find these answers is through discovery. And pretty much everything that's happened to me in the past 5 years has been through curiously committing to something, and accidentally stuff has happened along the way. And I'm just going to keep backing that for as long as it lasts. And that's fun. That's what's really rewarding as well, is it's moving things forwards. And the rock going down the river analogy feels really spot on for it, because it's just tumbling down this river. Having a good time, but getting bashed about every once in a while by the elements. It seems very fitting. But I think curiosity leads to self-discovery, and that really ties into a concept that with Omni Performance, our coaching business, we really buy into what we call the wintering, which is using winter as an opportunity to embrace the elements, embrace the darkness.
I love that.
Embrace the misery that comes with the time of year where it's easier to just drink a little bit more, get up a little bit later, go to bed a little bit later, let bad habits seep in, justify things because of the festive period, this, that, and the other, even though we know some of these things aren't good for us. I'm not saying that this time of year for everybody looks the same way at all, but rather that we all feel the squeeze when winter rolls around. and it's very easy to sort of sit back and be squeezed. So we use this as an opportunity to, I mean, practically speaking, we use it to build our aerobic base, do training that we don't ordinarily do throughout most of the year, because training for a triathlon over the winter is shit. It will ruin your love for triathlon because you are doing everything indoors for a sport that is designed to be outdoors. So using that opportunity as a way to base build as an individual rather than just athletically for a more positive spring, summer, etc. How do you set up the systems and structures to thrive within the winter is the question that we ask ourselves, and one that every year I have found to be very rewarding. But every year, every time the weather starts to turn and I have to start looking at where my big jackets are and where this is and where that is, I feel the squeeze myself. So it's setting up the systems and the structures for success within the winter means that you'll be rock solid when the external factors of just mood, daylight, all of the things that can have a huge influence on us day to day are more favorable. So your version of the dark place, your version of obsession, how does that tie in with that concept, the wintering?
The wintering is a great concept. I love that phrase. I kind of call it the obsession arc. And I'm playing around with like these two ideas. One is like the obsession arc. One is the obsession year. I might try to do this like an actual thing next year where, people can kind of submit what they want to do for their obsession year. And what that is basically if you do something every day for a year, you will completely change your life, right? No one really does that though. I think if you write every day for a year online, you'll change your life. You'll build an audience of some size. If you train for something every day for a year, running, marathon, whatever, you'll completely change your life. That's kind of what that looks like. It's different. It's different. But I would call kind of the wintering is like, it's kind of like the dark place, basically. It's like the dark season. But it's also actually not. It is kind of similar to, it's less similar to the obsession year and more similar to the obsession arc, which is this new thing where I tweeted a little and shared on Instagram a little while ago that if you want to change your life, what you should do is shave your head. You see this? You should shave your head and sign up for something extreme, whether that's a marathon or a triathlon or whatever. And it resonated with a bunch of people.
So I'll admit, I read that and I thought, oh, interesting. That is going to piss a lot of people off. And then I actually read the way that you qualified the head shaving, and I thought that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Which is that every time that you look at yourself in the mirror, you won't recognize the person you're looking at versus the person you were before you made the decision to commit to something new. Because it's an environment change. Because
you have that, and you have the athletic change. So I did this 3 months ago. It's the best thing I ever did, and it was amazing. Or 2 months ago even, and because you're getting I was losing a ton of weight. I'm like looking in the mirror, have the shaved head, and I'm literally someone new every single day. It's like incredible. And so what's beautiful about this, it's very similar to the wintering because it's like, this isn't forever. Your hair is going to grow back, right? You don't have to keep a shave forever unless you're a psychopath, which is fine too. But I look like a pure psychopath when I shaved it. Now it's like, actually
saves on shampoo costs, however.
Saves on shampoo. So yeah, you don't have to worry about it. I love my haircut now. I never had my hair this short. Like it's kind of similar to your hair. Like it's.
I loved the convenience of having a shaved head during COVID. I was actually quite sad it made me sad that our hairdressers are open again now and I have a reason to look better because I do look better with a full head of hair, even though it's trying its best to leave me behind. But it's, I fully get the concept of it simplifies things as well.
Dude, I got like 20 DMs. People shave their head. I swear.
And have you heard back from them since? People been like, you know what, week 1, week 2, everything's going well.
I don't know. I should check in with them. I'm gonna make like a chat or something for all
the shaved head squadron.
Some of them had really nice hair too. I kind of felt bad. I'm like, oh, because the other part about it is the first 2 weeks you genuinely look like a psychopath a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's like you care less about girls, you care less about everything else. You're just like it's you and your obsession, and that's it. And sometimes you need it.
When do you think obsession can cross into a negative space? Because there are people that will have gone down the wrong path with obsessive qualities, and I think it's important to reference that positive obsession is positive, but blindly and stubbornly following a path that is negative through obsession can have downstream, obviously, negative consequences. So when do you think that turning point is? Do you think it's circumstantial? Do you think it's dependent on the individual? What are the things to look out for to make sure that your obsession is a healthy one?
Yeah, there's two. The first is more like early on. It's like you want to obsess over something that has to do with creation, like an output versus an input.
Yeah.
Right. It's like obsessed with drugs or alcohol. That's purely selfish. It's just for you. You could argue if it's for art, it's different, but regardless, you're obsessed with, something for you. Netflix, purely selfish. Versus creation, it's art, or it's YouTube, or it's fitness, it's running, it's something outside of yourself.
Yep.
That's usually a healthy obsession. But then even that can go too far, where it's, I think it comes down to relationships. It's like you have to find where you find joy, and some people will find joy working, nonstop on their thing, 24/7. And then if it hurts your relationships, you just have to decide what you care more about. Do you care more about your obsession or the relationships? I think the right relationships will support your obsession and will not tell you to be unobsessed. And if you are going too far, they'll tell you that you're hurting them, and then you have to make that choice, which most people will care about the relationships because that lets you do your thing, that lets you keep going. It's hard to do it alone. And it's probably not worth it to do it alone. Right. But that's where people, the obsessed artist is like a trope, right? Where it's like these people just become all consumed by their thing and then erupt, and they, often they die young. And it's like, you have to watch out for that. I think the relationships are like the sign that you're going too far, when people will tell you, because those are the people who usually support you, and they'll tell you when it's not healthy. Because that's really all that matters, is relationships, I think.
Agreed. I think inputs via outputs is a great way of measuring it. Very, very simple. But I think do you think there's a risk of people becoming insular and compromising that, and not seeing the value of their relationships through committing to something that their friends and family might not understand? Because if you're obsessed amongst those that aren't, then it's easy to feel that that's a fountain not drain sort of analogy. Is it these people fueling my obsession, or are they in the way of it? So how can people make sure that they don't just isolate themselves in pursuit of their goals and therefore compromise on the relationships, which we both agree are so valuable to keep you accountable to yourself long term? Yeah,
it's hard. I think it's hard because obsession can feel like a love affair. It can feel like this is like the thing you're in love with, right? So you're going to choose it over everything else. And that can like blind you, like you're saying, make you do things you wouldn't otherwise. So I honestly don't know if I have an answer. Like, I'm still figuring out, I think though, obsession though isn't something you should be, when I talk about it, it's not, I talk about it like a million ways, right? I use it like a noun, a verb, an adjective. It's not something you should be 24/7. You have to go through periods of obsession, whether that's a few months or whether that's a few hours a day, and then you come out and you have dinner with your girlfriend, your wife, whatever. That's what it needs to be looked at. Like I talk about it kind of like the obsessed self. It's like my alter ego, right? Like I do these AI pictures, and like that's literally like me. Like that's what I want to be. But I'm not always them. And like in person, I'm much more like, I don't know, fun and like happy, versus like my writing, you could get a different sense sometimes. And so that's how I view it. It's like, go in and come out of that obsession. That's what you should be doing.
So it shouldn't be all consuming, because no. it should be something you're in control with, not letting control you. I think the big error I've made in the past with my obsession, and the one that actually caused me the biggest issue with my own depression when I was younger, was I let the plan control me rather than I the plan. And by that, I mean that I'd mapped out my life 5 years in the future, and therefore any decision that I was making or day that I was spending that wasn't in pursuit of that future was a day that was failed. But the plan that I created was hypothesized within a different set of circumstances. And the circumstances and environment changed, but I didn't change the plan. So I was then at the mercy of my own obsession, completely stubbornly holding myself accountable to it, even though the plan was no longer, it didn't have the utility that it was designed for. And that ultimately led me down a path of just punishing myself psychologically over and over again, feeling that I was a failure, feeling that I couldn't do anything right, and that I wasn't holding myself accountable to the goals I'd set. So the key thing for me now is that essentially I will still map out the future. I will still hold myself accountable to the goals that I set, but I need to constantly reassess and reevaluate the circumstances in which I'm operating and look at things objectively, because things will change that are out with your control. And actually the sort of mark of control as an individual is being able to look at those things and therefore navigate through them by controlling the plan rather than letting the plan control you. Because saying, I am going to commit to a marathon in 6 months' time, if you get hit by a bus the following day, and then you spend the next 3 months in a hospital bed punishing yourself that you can't train for a marathon because you said you were going to, that's not a healthy relationship.
There are people who still do it too.
Yeah.
There are people who will like, screw it, I'm getting to the race.
That's what's crazy as well, isn't it? Yeah. And it's I think it's really important to just adapt your obsession to the environment, and that'll make it more sustainable.
Yeah, I like what you said. Like, don't be the puppet master. Don't be like pulled by the strings.
Correct. Yeah.
And I'm going to write about that. That's good. Because it's like,
I look forward to reading that, because you'll articulate again. That's a much better analogy than my thing. So no, I look forward to reading that. It's
true though. Yeah, that's really, I haven't thought of it that way, but it's true. That's how it could feel when you're obsessed. It's like someone is pulling you.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a good thing in the beginning, but you just can't let it go too far. You can't let it completely.
Yeah. But it's
you have to stay in control.
It's knowing what lens to look at yourself through to make sure that you can see when things are going to go too far. That's the goal. That's what's beautiful.
I'm about to go through this, I feel like, with the running, and like I feel like running is like not even just marathon, but like all ultras, like what you're doing. It's like it can be a super all-consuming and like almost dangerous sport by how hard you push yourself, right? So it's like I'm excited to like feel all those things and deal with all that.
It's embracing the fear of the goals is the value. If it scares you,
yeah,
good. That it should. If your goals aren't scary, then you need to think a little bit bigger.
What would your advice be for me with running?
Marathons in February.
Yeah. And I just want to go like all year. I just want to do marathons as many as I can all year and go as fast as I can.
I think have a specific plan to train for this marathon in February for. Make it as data driven as possible so that you know exactly what your race is going to look like on the day. So you know what pace you're setting off at, you know what your minute mile splits are going to be the whole way through, you know the elevation profile where if you go from a 6:45 minute mile to a 7 minute mile on that mile where there's 63 meters of elevation, you're not then thinking, fuck, I fucked it up, everything's falling apart. And you know exactly, ruthlessly what the plan is on the day. Because if you then go in and execute that to the best of your ability, you will feel like you are totally in control, which then means that at the back end of that February, you can then reassess on the environment, like I was just saying, to see who am I now, having finished this marathon, having ruthlessly executed the plan that I've set myself. Yeah. What does this person now want to do next? Because even you saying now, I want to do marathons all year, every year, changes. That will change. I'm going through like a typical journey. Yeah, right? Yeah. And I think who you are when you finish that marathon will be different to who you are now. It'll be different to who you are when you are at the start line of that marathon.
Yeah.
So it's then a case of being honest with yourself on what makes you curious and excited next. And if that's 50K, if that's 100K, if that is just marathons over and over again, that's not a bad thing at all. But you might start getting pulled towards something else because there's a question about yourself that you want to ask and you want to find the answer to. And that's the journey that I've been on. And the beauty is I find a lot more questions that need answered, and I get a lot more answers to them by training across such a wide range of disciplines. And I do think that speaking objectively, given the way that you view the world from what I've gathered, you might limit the lessons that you can learn by just focusing on one distance and one race.
That makes sense.
So ask yourself the question in February, who am I now? What do I want to become? What does the future look like? And go from there rather than thinking too far ahead in the future.
It's good advice. It's really good advice.
So back to you. For those listening that aren't where they want to be in life, what are the things that they can do from tomorrow onwards to help them find their obsession?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to try to make this more public soon, but it's the obsession year. It's like pick something to create every day for a year, right? I think it doesn't even have to be what you stay doing, but usually just like look back to what you were doing as a kid. And usually your obsession is obvious. Like you can probably have memories when you were a kid. Usually they're very vivid and it's hard to remember them, but they're like signs of what you're doing now, right? In terms of the art, in terms of the athletics, in terms of like for me, I'm curious if you have any. I was always just super intense. That was like the word, right? Like when I was a kid, I was running into shit. In soccer, I was never like the best foot, with my feet, but I was always freaking intense. I would stick tackles. I would sprint up the field,
Yeah.
And like, I feel like that's how I'm approaching the running. It's just like, I just want to push through pain as hard as I can and push through, friction. And so it's like, look back, look at what's obvious, look at what you're already honestly doing. There's usually some type of like art. I like the word love affair. Like some people will love podcasts, right? They'll never listen they'll never speed them up. They'll listen slowly. They'll appreciate every aspect of it. So it's like, what mediums do you have a love affair with? And just how can you commit to creating it every day, or, if it's a big thing, like a few times a week, that would be my challenge. That's how you really find your obsession, in my opinion. It's just output. And, honestly, I haven't thought much about this, but you could apply that maybe to just like whichever pillar you like of the artist, the entrepreneur, the athlete. Pick one and create something every day. And that's how I think you really, really become obsessed.
And have faith that will compound over time, and that you don't need to address every pillar of your life all at once, because that's a mistake I've made in the past.
Yeah.
Start small, start simple, and build.
And I've been thinking more and more about like which pillars should come first. It's like, should one come before the other? And, I don't know. Maybe. I think a lot of ways, like I'm kind of following like the artist, athlete, entrepreneur in order,
Okay. Yeah.
And like I have entrepreneurial stuff I do, but I don't really have like my big business, right? And it's like, I want to, but it's like, I feel like that big business will only be right if I do the art first and the athletics first. And that maybe that's just me, but it will only be like the thing only I can create, which is the goal, right? To create. That's why like you saying you thought about doing High Rocks, like I don't think that's the right thing at all. It's like you clearly aren't that interested in it. You're now, when I look at you as an athlete, I put you in your own thing. You're in your own group, which honestly for athletes is pretty rare. There are so many freaking athletes like on Instagram, YouTube, and they're all kind of doing the same stuff.
Yep.
So yeah.
There's no right answer, and that's the beauty of it, which I think is
but the goal is to like put out, this is my philosophy, really simply. Put out so much stuff. Do your thing so much like you've done. You did so many different competitions, so much training. And then you found this unique thing that you came up with, this own game for you to play, right? Right?
Yep.
And I did the same thing with the writing. It's like I just was posting every single day. You go back to my old content, it is like stupid. It's like so dumb. It's like little infographics or it's just like the first year I barely wrote my own writing. I was doing just quotes because I didn't know how to write.
Yep.
But it's like you do that, and then one day I just start writing about obsession, and people love it. And now I basically found my idea forever. Maybe that changes, but I don't think it will for a long time. I've been talking about it for like 2 years. I found running, like you find these things, and it's very rare for them to fall in your lap. You kind of have to go out there and just make a lot of stuff, just compound around something, and just wait for these things to fall in your lap, right? Like a bit more tactically, like last year my stuff blew up because I took my writing, had a few 100,000 followers, and made these little videos, right? I only did that because I got inspired by someone I met at lunch. And I only met that person at lunch because I'd been making content for years, and it compounded. And the same with running. Like I got a friend was doing this marathon, and I signed up. Yeah, I wouldn't have met that friend if I wasn't doing my thing and compounding. And so that'd be my challenge, is like start the compounding around something. Right?
Simple.
Yeah, simple. And it's like tactical. Go and do it today. It's like
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Well, Zach, thank you very much. That's been enlightening, and lots of things to think on, and a lot of similarities. Lots of things we're very aligned on.
Definitely.
And I think a lot of things that people will reflect on in their own lives. So thanks again.
Thank you.